Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome into Sack and Dubs. After game four, Warriors go down 3-1. I think we kind of saw the writing on the wall after game three didn't fare so well, and you saw Jimmy Butler empty the tank. That tank remained essentially empty last night, and Draymond said that Jimmy wasn't feeling great, and that's probably the case. But whatever the case was, Jimmy just didn't have it last night. And if Jimmy wasn't going to essentially be Batman or even Robin, and Buddy wasn't going to catch fire, there just wasn't a ton of hope for the Warriors in this. And honestly, the first half, they played pretty well despite Minnesota just being on fire, shooting over 50% from three the entire game. I thought the Warriors found enough offense in that first half, namely Jonathan Kuminga, who had a third straight great game, 23 points, efficient shooting, got to the line, I think, eight times in that first half and made all eight free throws. And the Warriors kind of pieced it together. Draymond hit a couple of threes, and they were finding buckets and more so offensive rebounds and gave themselves a chance to maximize possessions and score enough to keep up with Minnesota until the superstar on Minnesota, and then a fringe all-star player in and much improved Julius Randle. Just we had no answer for either one of them. And when that's the case, you could try to mix things up as we did in the late second quarter and throw a zone at them, that 2-3 tandem zone where you're kind of matching up on the perimeter. And, it was definitely very effective for the last 6 minutes of that second quarter when we made our run. And you had hoped that we'd get back to that a little bit more in the second half. But ultimately, you need to be able to make buckets in order to have your defense be able to get back and get set and run an effective zone. And then on top of that, when the Wolves are just on fire from three, that zone really, you're just praying that they're missing threes and then hoping to get rebounds. And obviously it didn't work out. So yeah, guys, I mean, it sucks. I guess the only thing that I have kind of done to comfort myself is say at least we're not the Boston Celtics because they have it even suckier yesterday. But yeah, not looking like the Warriors have too much ray of sunshine left. Obviously, it's the game tomorrow in Minnesota. I mean, they've had three chances to win one for Steph. I'm going to assume, based on Steph's comments, that, even if he wanted to be Superman, he couldn't tomorrow. It just doesn't sound like he's close to ready, or at least definitely not playing tomorrow. And that being the case, I mean, you always have a shooter's chance to get hot from three in the modern day NBA. If you just outshoot a team from the line, from the 3-point line, you have a chance. The problem is the Warriors just do not have the shooters outside of Buddy Hield, who is now being stacked up against on the defensive side and just having trouble getting anything, any kind of set three-pointer. You just don't have the shooters. It's not like Brandon Podziemski is all of a sudden going to start shooting even like 35%. He's not going to make three threes next game. And if he does, hey, maybe you have a chance. But, between the guys that you actually have a chance to make multiple threes in your role players, I'm talking Podziemski, Moody, Quinton Post, I guess even Draymond Green. Those guys are all below 35% three-point shooters and honestly below 30% three-point shooters at this moment in time. Not to mention the inability to be a two-way contributors like most of those guys are at times. All that being said, it's just this roster wasn't built for enough spacing, enough shooting, enough offense or scoring outside of just Steph being a superhero and Jimmy Butler being something close to that. So, I listen, Steve Kerr has done an okay job. I know there's a lot of people angry at Steve Kerr and putting all the blame on him, and he definitely has his faults. Number one being his usage of Kaminga up until this point, where how could you have DNP'd this guy and look at what he's doing now? You could have used this to maybe save yourself having to play 7 games in that Houston series, and then maybe Steph doesn't get hurt or your team's a bit more rested heading into Minnesota. Who knows? But my biggest critique of Steve Kerr has just been his usage and non-usage of Jonathan Kuminga when I know you needed to win games, and I know Kuminga does a lot of things as a coach probably drives you crazy. But in the long term, it's like this team was never going to win a championship without Kuminga emerging, finding a fit and playing those minutes with Butler and Curry and giving yourself a chance to reach your peak as a team. And we just didn't really ever get the opportunity to do that. So I put that on Steve Kerr. That being said, for all the noise on his rotations and you're too small or you don't have enough shooters or you're playing the wrong guys with the wrong guys. I get it. The lineups are very flawed, but I would argue that the roster is flawed. This is much more than who you're playing and your substitution patterns. You just don't have the pieces. You can play a game of chess, but if you're starting without a queen and whatever, a couple rooks to start each game, you're probably not going to win enough of the time. And that's especially when Steph Curry's out. There's just not enough, again, shooting. There's not enough two-way players. For a thought experiment, I mean, you could probably say outside of Steph and outside of Jimmy Butler, 90%, if not all, of this roster falls into at least three of these four categories. Okay. So, number one, they are undersized for their position. Almost everybody, including Draymond Green, maybe outside of Kaminga, is undersized at their position. Two is they are below a 35% three-point shooter, especially in a playoff situation when you need them the most. And yeah, I mean, other than Buddy Hield, everyone's under a 35% three-point shooter. Also, everybody, for the most part, is not a two-way player. And that's the biggest problem that lies therein is that nobody, I mean, even Draymond Green, even, yeah, I mean, pretty much, I mean, Pajemski's probably the closest thing to a two-way player, but that's only because he's about even offensively as his defense. They're both okay and have not been great at all lately. It's been horrific lately on Pajemski, but I'm not even going to get into that. He's been terrible. But yeah, I'd say at least 90% of the guys are not two-way players. They usually have one skill set as a rebounder or a defensive player or like Buddy Hield, like an offensive player, but no one that you can consistently plug in to play two-way minutes for yourselves. And then lastly, nobody can finish at the rim. Who on this team outside of Steph, Kaminga, finishes well at the rim? I mean, you can almost include Jimmy Butler in that lately because he has just been brutal around the rim. I get that that's part of his grifting for fouls and being off balance and taking unorthodox shots at the rim, but I would think that he's a better finisher at the rim than we got from him this season, but that's beside the point. So yeah, I mean, you look at those four things and three of those four traits are lacking for almost every single person on this roster. What do you expect this team to become? Yeah, they're led by two stars, aka superstars, and maybe the best defensive player I've ever seen in Draymond Green. And it got them to the second round. And I still think that this Warriors team with a healthy Steph would have taken care of Minnesota. And I don't think it would have gone seven. I think they would have taken care of business in five or six. Just the way this team was playing, the way that Steph just torches Minnesota, and just everything about it. The Warriors have been in these games, the first half, and I know it's only two, 3/4 of each of the last couple games, and then they kind of faltered, like the Lakers did against this Minnesota team, who I guess is just a really good second half team. That all being said, I thought the Warriors they can hang with Minnesota, and if you looked at just the opportunity ahead of them, if they were somehow able to get out of this series, Oklahoma City's struggling with Denver. There is a chance that Denver comes out, and even if OKC came out, the Warriors have actually matched up well with them, and they probably would be underdogs against either one of those teams being on the road, especially. But you can't tell me that they would for sure lose that series against OKC or Denver. On the East, I mean, we already know Boston's done. The Cavs are done. You're looking at Indiana or New York. Both teams, I would be happy to play in the finals. And so what hurts the most is just knowing that this potentially is the Warriors, Steph Curry Warriors' best shot left at winning a championship and ring number five. The future, it's just getting the Thunder are only going to tool up more. The Rockets are only going to get better. The Spurs, good God, the league dodged a bullet last night when it was down to either the Mavs or the Spurs getting Cooper Flag. The thoughts of Wemby, Stephon Castle, and Flag all being on rookie contracts and all being together for the next decade and a half. The window's closed for almost everybody at that point. Again, save for the Thunder, maybe save for the Rockets, both who are in play for Giannis or Durant. And the way player movement works, these years in the NBA, sure, there's a lot of other moves that can be made. But my point is that for the Warriors, unless you are able to somehow get a Durant or Giannis to say, "Hey, trade me to the Warriors," and sign and trade Kuminga and first round picks, which is nowhere near the as competitive as some of these other teams can put together. But if a trade was demanded to them, a la Anthony Davis to the Lakers, then the Warriors have a chance to be better than teams like the Thunder and Spurs going forward. But as it stands, as we look to next year, we won't quite do that yet. But as we look forward to the next year and maybe the next couple years of Steph's window as it kind of closes, this is probably the best chance. This is the best chance that the Warriors are going to have. And for those reasons, it's so tough. I'm sure Steph Curry knows that. I'm sure he's sitting there with his hamstring, knowing that, man, if I could just find a way to play, find a way to just contribute, just to somehow survive Minnesota, even just for another game and just go on to the next one. Can I get back for game 5 if my hamstring was 75% enough to get us to game 6 where I get 3 days rest? And if all goes well, and now I'm, 80, 85%, take care of business at home. And now we're in a game 7. At what risk? Right? It's what's the re-injury risk? And I'm less concerned about, hey, he tweaks his hamstring again because you have several months to get better, and he'll take care of his hamstring. And sure, it might mess up his off-season training and his golf, and it might set him back a little bit if you actually do turn that into a grade 2 hamstring. Grade 3 hamstring, though, now you're dealing with scar tissue for and re-aggravation, re-injury risk, for another year. And that's something that you don't want to have linger into next year. And then also, knock on wood, I would hate to say it, but a compromised hamstring, you just don't know where else that could, rear its head, whether it's a hip, a knee, a Jason Tatum lower leg injury. Won't even say the word, but when you're playing compromised, you just don't know what that leads to. So, even if that percentage of a more severe injury where it would affect him next year is 5% or less, which is fairly low. And him playing at whatever percent he's at gives the Warriors a say a 55% chance of winning the game to get to game 6, where then maybe you have a 75% chance of winning that game with a healthy-ish Steph. You have to weigh the risk reward, but honestly, it's less about the circumstances outside anything other than how his hamstring feels and what Rick Celebrini thinks. He's not going to put stuff out there. He's not healthy enough to play. And if, hey, you're more likely to do damage to yourself than not, which I believe is right where Steph is, he's still probably feeling the tightness in the hamstring. It's not stable enough to play. He's not going to have the burst that he needs to be that effective. So then there's nothing to discuss. And it's as simple as that. As much as we'd all like him to play and push through it and give yourself a chance to advance, it just means his hamstring's not ready. And that's just kind of what it sounds like from Draymond, from Steph's words. So it is what it is. And if that's the case, I don't expect the Warriors, unfortunately, to get out of this second round. And if that's the case, the conversation pretty much just shifts to, hey, what are you going to do to remake this offense to get some shooters, get some more life, get more two-way players, get a center and get some more size? And we're not going to go down that road too much, but your biggest trade piece is Jonathan Kuminga, sign and trade, or Jimmy Butler, which I don't know if he carries that much value as a max contract guy. You can decide about what you want to do based on if someone wants to come to the Warriors, that if it makes more sense to keep Kuminga and trade Jimmy or vice versa or whatever the case is. You have 4 tradable first round picks. Those are your other assets, but we are up against the cap and going to go into the luxury tax. So however you want to look at it, Mike Dunleavy, you have your work cut out for you. And in not so many words, but I guess so many words, Steve Kerr, I'd like you to be a bit better, but I put more, I don't want to say blame, but there's more room for improvement on this front office's side in this offseason. And again, it's not saying that they didn't try to go get Paul George. They didn't try to go get Lowry Markkinen or all these other players, Durant. They drafted well the last 2 years. Pajemski, Post, you did as well as you could have, honestly, and you hit on a lot of those late picks, even TJD. So, there's no fault there, but the way this roster played out, especially in the playoffs, you just have guys who aren't ready to be playoff contributors, especially as two-way players, that could go get you a win without Steph, can go get you into a conference finals even with Steph. Things that need to be answered. So it's tough, and I don't want to sound like this is the swan song yet, but this is as low as we've been this season, and we got one more game tomorrow. So I am going to hope for the best, guys. I hope you do the same. And nevertheless, guys, it was a good run to have at least have this much hope up until this point. And hey, maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe we'll hit some shots, and maybe the Timberwolves will go cold like they had the first couple games, and especially in that first half. And you just never know what can happen. So go find a way to win at any cost. An elimination game is an elimination game. It's the hardest game for any team to close out another team, and you're going to get the Warriors' best effort. I hope, as long as Jimmy's feeling better, and the Warriors don't have that quit in them. So get out to a lead, play from the front. Wolves might tighten up a bit, knowing that hey, Steph Curry looms in Game 6, and you go steal, win, get to go home, and now you have some hope. All right, guys. Until next time. Sorry, that was a rough one, but we'll be okay. We will be okay. I'll talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Chris Chin. Peace, love, and stack and dubs.